Welcome. You're watching I24 News, coming to you live from Tel Aviv. The top stories this hour. The IDF says it has killed a senior Hamas operative as it continues to operate in both northern and southern Gaza. Kuwait's emir dissolves parliament, warning that democracy must not be used to destabilise the country. And Israel prepares to honour its fallen war heroes in the annual Memorial Day. We'll have a special report from Kibbutz Be'eri. Well, first, the IDF has moved back into northern Gaza's Jabalia neighbourhood amid signs Hamas is regrouping there. This as it presses on with an offensive in the areas surrounding Rafah. Well, the United States says it will share intelligence on the whereabouts of senior Hamas leaders if Israel holds back from a full offensive in the Strip's southernmost city. Our Bianca Zanini has this report.
Empty streets in Rafah, Gaza. Palestinians trying to leave the area as Israel warns of expanding military operations in the city. According to the UN Refugee Agency for Palestinians, nearly 300,000 people have fled Rafah, the last Hamas stronghold in Gaza, where over 130 Israeli hostages are believed to be held by the terror group, and where roughly 1 million people are believed to be sheltering, many trying to evacuate on IDF orders.
Our operations against Hamas in Rafah remains limited in scope and focus on tactical advances, tactical adjustments, and key military advantages, and have avoided densely populated areas. Since the start of our precise operation against Hamas in Rafah, we have eliminated dozens of terrorists, exposed underground terror tunnels, and vast amounts of weapons. Prior to our operations, we urge civilians to temporarily move towards humanitarian areas and move away from the crossfire that Hamas puts them in. Our war is against Hamas, not against the people of Gaza.
At the moment, the IDF is operating in the outskirts of Rafah, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is determined to expand the military incursion despite increasing U.S. pressure to hold off. The Biden administration promising a carrot and a stick to avoid the situation from blowing up. The Washington Post reporting that the U.S. is offering Israel valuable intelligence and assistance in locating Hamas leaders and pinpointing tunnels, amongst other things, with some analysts questioning why this hasn't already been offered to Israel, a close ally in the middle of a war. Last week, President Joe Biden gave his starkest warning to Israel so far, saying that the U.S. will not provide Israel with weapons for an attack on Rafah. Previously, Biden had said a Rafah invasion would be a, quote, red line, but says that so far Israel hasn't gone into densely populated civilian areas, and it hasn't crossed that line yet. Meanwhile, Netanyahu is also under growing domestic pressure to reach a ceasefire deal with Hamas in order to bring back the hostages still kept in Gaza. Overnight, a rocket launched from inside the Strip made a direct hit to a house in southern Israel. And Sunday morning, thick smoke rose from explosions in northern Gaza as Israel continues to fight Hamas, with no sign of calm on the horizon.
Well, let's get the latest on the situation in Gaza now. We're joined from southern Israel by our correspondent, Zach Anders. So, Zach, even as the IDF operates in both northern and southern Gaza, rockets still being fired at Israel today?
Yeah, that's right. Earlier this morning, there was damage in Ashkelon, minor injuries, a couple of other rocket launches that were noted, some that apparently did not trigger red alarms either. Interceptions seen without the red alarms taking place. What we're seeing on the ground, and again, we're operating under tight IDF censorship. We cannot share exact movements of some of the ground forces. But what I can share is that 2 simultaneous ground campaigns are underway, one in Rafah and one in the Jabalia and Zaytun neighborhoods of Gaza City. It does appear that equal force strength has been deployed by the IDF in both arenas. A considerable amount of ground forces have been dedicated to these 2 operations that are ongoing. You heard in that report the mention of President Biden's red line. Now, that question of what constitutes the civilian center, the civilian heart of Rafah, where is that red line going to be crossed? Well, the latest evacuation order that was handed down yesterday includes the UAE field hospital inside this zone. Also, the Rafah markets, the UNRWA distribution center. Those are all key points that are inside this latest evacuation zone. We haven't heard any statement or anything committal from the Biden administration, expecting with those afternoon hours, or rather on Monday, to perhaps see from the White House press secretary, the State Department, some additional answers regarding this. But it does seem, with this latest evacuation order, now including some 300,000 located in this eastern half of Rafah, the city of Rafah itself, that this is a major step, and one that, if you go back and watch that interview with President Biden on CNN, it does appear that this is encroaching on what he considered to be something that's too far. But just want to reiterate, again, ground forces are involved in a considerable campaign in 2 arenas, in Rafah in the south, in Jabalia and Zaytun neighborhoods near Gaza City in the north. And from what we can tell about the deployment and some of the sources that we've spoken to, this deployment in the Gaza City area does appear like a commitment to a week or several weeks worth of ground forces being in this area. Now, that's not something we can say for certain, but at this point, it does appear that this is a deployment and an operation that will take some time, and that it is a point of emphasis, a point of focus within the IDF to be a sustained presence in this area as they continue to engage Hamas. And we've seen over the weekend as well, to very deadly effects, the IDF saying dozens have been killed, Hamas on the ground, but as well as 5 IDF soldiers killed this weekend in this area, in this engagement. Hamas claiming that they've had success repelling the IDF forces in the area. Of course, this is Hamas's claims, but they're also claiming that booby-trapped homes await the IDF as they encroach on this area, that the streets and the tunnels entrances are lined with traps. So it does appear that this is really kicking off. Both sides are staring straight at each other, preparing for a considerable engagement to take place.
Zach, thank you very much indeed. Zach Andrews there with the very latest on the situation in Gaza. So Zach telling us there that the IDF has 2 major operations underway right now in northern and in southern Gaza, in Rafah. With me in the studio this hour, Yaki Dayan is the former Israeli consul in Los Angeles. Thank you for being with us, Yaki.
Good evening, Laura.
So first of all, let's talk about what's happening in Rafah, because of course the Biden administration has been very clear with Israel. We do not want you to go into Rafah. We will withhold weapons. If you go ahead with this operation. We're talking about a tactical, limited operation in Rafah. How do you interpret that?
Exactly. This is why the IDF is declaring that this is a very tactical and limited operation right now in Rafah, because there are still disagreements with the administration, and the Israelis are trying to reach some kind of an agreement with the administration and evacuate as many people as possible in order to prepare and to start this big ground operation in Rafah, which the government has declared a few times that it's going to. So what we are going to see now is a tactical, limited, but a growing, expanding operation in Rafah, because while operating very tactically, making sure that you evacuate at the same time simultaneously the population from Rafah and starting a much bigger and deeper operation in Rafah.
Now, I want to talk about this report in the Washington Post, quite a bizarre report. It has been picked up in Israeli media. The report claims that the United States is withholding information about the whereabouts of senior Hamas leaders, presumably Sinwar, perhaps Mohammed Deif, and will not share that information with Israel unless it does what the US wants in Rafah.
So, Laura, I think that the bizarre is kind of an understatement here. And although it comes from a serious media outlet, I can tell you as one who served in Washington, D.C. and worked extensively with the Americans, the depth of the intelligence cooperation that we have with the Americans is unbelievable, unprecedented, and I can name other things, but it's really an unbelievable cooperation, intelligence cooperation that we have with the Americans. This is to start with. The second thing is the Americans upholding information. I mean, the hostages are still there. They want to see the release of the hostages, and there are even American hostages that are over there. So that sounds completely fake to me. And the third reason why it sounds completely fake to me, because if we catch or when we catch Sinwar and we release the hostages, then it will bring the military operation almost to its end. And undoubtedly, the Americans want to see an end to this war. So because of those three reasons, what was written in the Washington Post sounds completely fake to me.
You don't buy it. All right, Yaki, for now. Thank you very much. Well, the United States is not the only country putting pressure on Israel not to go into Rafah. Egypt has strongly warned Israel against an operation in the city, which of course is just across the border from Egypt. Cairo has refused to cooperate with Israel on aid deliveries via the Rafah crossing, which is now under Israeli control on the Gazan side. And now Cairo says it will support South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. An Egyptian official reportedly said that the operation in Rafah could jeopardize Egypt's decades-old peace treaty with Israel. But apparently in a way to walk that back, the Egyptian foreign minister now being quoted as saying that the peace treaty with Israel is a strategic choice. So what's going on here? To talk about all of this, Dr. Nazir Al-Amari is a writer and political commentator. Thank you very much for being with us. Nazir, a lot of messaging going on here then, but the bottom line is Cairo is clearly very unhappy about the IDF operation in Rafah and is taking a number of steps to make its point. How far do you think Cairo will go?
Well, they will go as far as to look like they are with the Arab Street, with the Egyptian public opinion, that wants the Egyptian leadership to be at least as strong in its position as the many countries around the world. Of course, they don't want any Gazans to cross the border and facilitate what they perceive as forced evacuation of Gazans. At the same time, they don't want to look like they are helping the Israelis with the takeover of the Rafah crossing. So they don't want to look like they are partners with Israel and cooperating with Israel after it has modified, after it has taken over the Rafah crossing. Simultaneously, they are working as facilitators, to achieve some type of ceasefire. But also they have shown that they can escalate, and now they want to join that lawsuit against Israel at the International Criminal Court. And that shows that Egypt is modifying its position to remain a staunch, at least in the eyes of the public opinion, as a staunch ally of the Palestinians.
And remind us, Nazir, it's not just humanitarian concerns, is it? Tell us why the Egyptians are so unhappy about an IDF operation in Rafah.
Well, I think that they are fearful of looking like they are working with the Israelis or coordinating with the Israelis as a result of the military operation in Rafah. If they start to deal with the Israelis and facilitate aid, that will look like they are working with the Israelis, and they want to show that they disagree with the whole notion of launching an attack on Rafah. So this is very delicate for the Egyptians. And they also want to make sure that Israel respects that peace agreement and not think of, allowing Palestinians to cross that border. There are some Egyptians who believe that eventually Israel will probably create a humanitarian situation that will push some Gazans out of Gaza. So the Egyptian government is aware of all of that, and they want to make sure that everybody understands where they stand.
Okay, Nasir, stay with us for now, if you would. Yaki Dayan, I'll bring you in. Is Israel paying enough attention to the messages coming out of Cairo?
Almost. And I agree completely with the analysis here. I mean, it's all about public opinion with the Egyptians, because many things have been coordinated with the Egyptians regarding Rafah. I mean, high official Israelis went to Cairo to coordinate that. But there is a big fear with inside Egypt because of the public opinion. I mean, once you saw the tanks coming to the Rafah crossing point and waving the Israeli flag, and no doubt it created some kind of a resentment in the Egyptian public opinion, and the Egyptians had to respond as they responded. But we look at the Egyptians as a strategic partner for the long run. And if you want to block the Philadelphia corridor, you'll have to do it together with the Egyptians. Otherwise, it won't work. It won't work only with the Egyptians, because when it was under the control of the Egyptians, a lot of smuggling went on and a lot of corruption went on through the Philadelphia corridor. So it will have to be a concerted effort, not only with the Egyptians, but with the Americans and others. But no doubt Israel has a strategic interest preserving this cooperation with the Egyptians.
Okay, and Nasir, let's talk about what's happening in Jordan today, because Egypt is one of the countries participating in a huge military drill in Jordan. 33 countries taking part, as diverse as Egypt, Romania, Japan. Is this about strengthening the anti-Iran alliance, or what is happening here?
Well, definitely. Jordan's security has, for many decades, has never been in any serious jeopardy. There is fear that this situation, which is unfolding in Gaza with no political horizon, can actually lead to a catastrophic situation in the whole region. And we have heard many European countries talking about Jordan and the need to make sure that Jordan remains a stable country. The fear is that if Jordan is destabilized because of both internal and external forces, that will probably be worse than Gaza and make the situation for Israel and the Palestinians even worse. So I think Jordan has started to become critical for bringing some kind of stability to the region and ending the conflict in Gaza.
Stay with us, Nazir. Yes.
The one who is trying to destabilize Jordan is Iran and the Iranian forces, and this is of a strategic nature. I mean, this cooperation, we saw that when the Iranians tried to attack Israel, the Jordanians play an extremely pivotal role in defending in this coalition, and we are all about creating coalition. So this is exactly the continuation of the coalition that CENTCOM has created to fight against the Iranians.
And of course, the CENTCOM leader was in Israel over the
weekend.
Yes. So Nasir al-Amari, interestingly enough, Lebanon is part of the coalition taking part in that drill today.
Well, it depends on which Lebanon you're talking about. Definitely, Hezbollah's Lebanon are not party to any of this, but we do have two governments or even more in Lebanon. So the official Lebanese stance is to look like they are doing business as normal. The Lebanese army receives aid from the U.S. The Lebanese government, as dysfunctional as it is, continues to work with international partners. But make no mistake about everybody understands who the enemy is here, and it's Iran lurking to see what could transpire as a result of this possible attack against Rafah. Because of the lack of political horizon, there are people like countries like Egypt, Jordan, who believe that this thing could actually turn into a regional conflict unless if the situation between Hamas and Israel is resolved. And there is a feeling that there is no political horizon, and therefore everybody unfortunately is looking at a situation that is deteriorating and could spill into other countries in the region.
Dr. Nasir El-Amari, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the Israeli government has been criticised for failing to talk about the so-called day after in Gaza. On Friday, the UAE's foreign minister denounced a suggestion by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the UAE might assist Palestinians in managing Gaza after the war. Abdullah bin Zayed said the UAE refused to be drawn into any plan aimed at providing cover for the Israeli presence in the Gaza Strip, as they put it. For more on that, we can go to Abu Dhabi. We're joined by Louai Al-Sharif, peace activist and expert in Arab-Israeli relations. Thank you very much for being with us, Louai. So did these comments by the Prime Minister cause a lot of anger in the UAE?
I wouldn't say a lot of anger, Laura, but I would say, of course, they made, for the first time, the foreign minister of the UAE publicly rejects some sort of ideas by the Prime Minister of Israel. And I wrote a post today that Ask Zelensky has gone public. I was referring to the incident that happened in January when the president of the UAE, it was reported that he told Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, that asked Zelensky for help for paying to the Palestinian workers who are barred from Israel after October 7th. But that was not official. But that is the first official statement that comes from the UAE. Of course, there was fury, but it wasn't that. It was just putting things in if you read things in context, Laura, you would understand why the foreign minister made such a statement, because he doesn't want anyone to believe, other than the fact that the UAE wants to achieve the aspirations of the Palestinians and doesn't want to be viewed as part of the new occupation of Gaza that is happening right now because of the war.
Okay, well, the UAE has been heavily involved in getting aid to civilians in Gaza. Is that, Louai, though, where the UAE sees its responsibility ending? Is the country really not interested in helping to rebuild Gaza for the future?
Of course, it is interested, and the foreign minister of the UAE, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, said that once a Palestinian government is formed, a Palestinian government that would meet the aspirations of the Palestinians, and I'm so sure that he was not referring to Hamas playing a role in that. When that happens, and when the Palestinians rule Gaza, and a government that is formed willing to live side by side with Israel, of course, the UAE will have more involvement in that regard. But of course, when it comes to the aid, more than 17 joint airdrops made by the UAE, and the UAE is willing to offer even more. But I believe that the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and other moderate states will play a greater role once this war ends, and once a Palestinian government that would meet the aspirations of the Palestinians will be formed.
Can I ask you about the Palestinian businessman, Mohammed Dahlan, because he's got a lot of attention here in Israel. He lives in the UAE and he has been touted as a potential future leader for the Palestinians. Would he be accepted? Where does the UAE stand on that?
Well, honestly, I just want to tell you one thing. Mohammed Dahlan lives in the UAE. And also, who would be the next leader of the UAE? This is something that I cannot really comment on, but I just said who would be the next, leader of the Palestinians, something that I cannot really speculate. But I mentioned today, Laura, to be very honest, that I personally, I have my full agreement that the Palestinians should have some sort of an aspiration of a statehood, or a clear roadmap to that. But I personally doubt the readiness of the Palestinians for statehood. I mentioned that over and over in your show before October 7th, after October 7th. There are no institutions that are ready. You know, Laura, before you make a state, you need to have an institution. So Israel, there was the Jewish National Fund that was responsible for purchasing the land, developing the infrastructure, and also you had some other organizations that were ready. But I don't see that. Before we speak about who would be the next leader, before we pinpoint fingers, who would be the next leader of the Palestinians? Are the Palestinians ready for a statehood? Are there institutions that are ready to build the upcoming state? That is the real question before we move to who would be the next leader.
Loai Al-Sharif, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
Yaki Dayan is here with me in the studio, and Israel keeps being criticised for failing to come up with a plan for post-war Gaza, but it is a little more complicated than that, isn't it?
But we just heard the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, criticising Israel for not having a strategic plan for the day after. And I would say that there are two things. I mean, yes, you're running a tactical war now, and as long as you haven't dismantled the capabilities of the Hamas, it would be very hard for any other force to emerge as an alternative to the Hamas. Nevertheless, Israel has to present and work with the Americans on the plans for the day after. It has to be strategically, because as long as the Hamas feels convenient that Israel doesn't present an alternative, or there is no alternative to the Hamas, then there are less leverages on the Hamas. So if you want to create leverages, there is the military leverage, but no doubt that the day after and the strategic plan is another leverage on the Hamas, and Israel has to use it and to work on it much more.
But would any alternate governance for Gaza would simply be targeted by Hamas? Doesn't Hamas have to be destroyed first?
So that's why Israel has to take over, at least at the very beginning, because there is no vacuum. You have to understand, Laura, there is no vacuum. When Israel enters Jabalia or Rafah or any other neighborhood in Gaza.
And Israel says it does not want to do that, just to be clear.
Yes, and it dismantles the Hamas capabilities and goes out. Then the Hamas that is hiding somewhere in the tunnels goes back and takes control, at least the administrative control. So you have to create some kind of an alternative also, not only on the military side, but also in the administrative side. So even if Israel doesn't have the willingness or the wish to take it over now, it has to create some kind of an alternative. And at the beginning, I see no other alternative than Israeli forces taking over the administrative level at the beginning and then giving it to a Palestinian authority, some kind of a Palestinian authority that will run the Gaza Strip.
Yaki Dayan, for now, thank you very much indeed. We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, France has denied that Hezbollah rejected a peace proposal it put forward last month. We'll talk more about the North next. Stay with us.
Israel's story must reach the whole world. The I-24 News Channel, broadcasting from Israel, with dozens of correspondents throughout the world, brings the truth from Israel to hundreds of millions of people in scores of countries.
Completely gunned down in their beds.
De la frontière qui sépare Israël.
The state of emergency and war in Israel.
Bringing Israel's story to the world. I-24 News Channels. Now on Hot.
Welcome back. Sirens have been blaring across Israel's northern communities this Sunday as the IDF continues to battle the Iranian-backed terrorist organisation Hezbollah. Meanwhile, a French official has denied Israeli media reports that Hezbollah rejected a French proposal for a ceasefire. Inside Lebanon today, a member of parliament blamed Israel for the ongoing fighting. Take a listen.
The Israelis persist in disregarding international institutions and all United Nations agencies, thereby showing no respect to UNIFIL, Resolution 1701, or other issues that some urge us to comply with, while the Israeli enemy does not adhere to them.
With me in the studio, Yaki Dayan. He's the former Israeli consul in Los Angeles. Thank you for staying with us, Yaki. So the fighting with Hezbollah clearly ongoing. The communities of northern Israel remain evacuated. People can't go back to their homes.
Yeah.
And now there's an additional fear, isn't there, that the US may hold back the munitions Israel needs to fight Hezbollah.
Plus, add another deadline that the Israeli government has set, which is September 1st. The kids have to go back to the schools. So you have another complication here. There is a direct connection between what is happening in Gaza and Lebanon. I mean, the Hezbollah is continuing its fire. And we understand that only, at least in Israel, they understand that only a military solution can push further away the Hezbollah forces from its border. Now, you asked your Egyptian guest about the participation of Lebanon now in the drill in Jordan. The Lebanese are trying to make some kind of differentiation between them and Hezbollah, but what Israel has clarified to the French and to the Americans is that if an overall war starts, there would be no differentiation in Lebanon between Lebanon and the Hezbollah forces, and the Hezbollah forces has to go to be pushed back at least 10 kilometers from the border. So at least in the short term, some kind of a diplomacy, some kind of a solution is trying to be found by the Americans and the French. Maybe it will, but it will be like a band-aid. It will be for a short while, because as long as you are not dismantling the Hezbollah, you'll have to have some kind of a military operation in order to push Hezbollah further away from the border.
Do you see the fact then that the Lebanese army is participating in this military drill in Jordan today? Is that a sign that the international community is trying to kind of boost the Lebanese army, the regular army in Lebanon, and could there be a scenario where they will be able to take control of the south?
Absolutely. I mean, the international community is hallucinating that they can go back to the 1701, the Security Council resolution that push to the north the Hezbollah, brings in a UNIFIL force and the South or the Lebanese army. That's, you know, when you look at the Lebanese army, that's a joke. I mean, they cannot stand against the Hezbollah. The Hezbollah is fully controlling that. The international community is trying to make this differentiation, but we know for a fact that there is no serious alternative to the Hezbollah, not serious military force in Lebanon. So Hezbollah is controlling that. So even though the international community is trying to create some kind of a differentiation, there is Hezbollah full control in Lebanon.
All right, Yaki, for now, thank you. Well, Hezbollah, of course, is funded and supported by Iran. Just 10% of Iranians turned out to vote in parliamentary elections over the weekend. This despite a call to cast a ballot from the country's supreme leader. The results cemented the powers of Iran's hardliners, which now control 233 out of the 290 seats in Iran's parliament. To talk more about all of that, Camelia Entekabifad is the editor-in-chief of the Independent Persian. Great to see you, Camelia. Thank you very much for joining us. Is this a record when it comes to low turnout, and will this be a concern for the Ayatollah?
Thank you for hosting, dearest Lara. Good evening to you and the viewers. We never had any large number of the participants participating at the elections in Iran. It happened in the past 45 years ago. They faked the number of the people voting their cast at the elections. And I can say maybe one time back to 1997, when Mohammad Khatami was presenting as a reformist nomination at the election, at that time, yes, we had the vast majority of the people turn up at the elections to make the changes. They believe that the government would be changed by electing Mohammad Khatami. Since then, most of the time, this regime, it changed the number to show their own support among of the people are very large and also demonstrate legitimacy. Why this time they decided to at least show up some of this number, which is still, I believe, the number has been raised and up, and it is not an exact number, because they don't care any longer to show they have enough support there inside Iran, and also they want to cut this competition between the other rival parties internally, and they will just hegemonize all these elected body of the regimes among of their own supporters. The number you are seeing today, it can be a true number of the regime supporters, which they are only the supporters of the supreme leader and the IRGC, or the Revolutionary Guards people. You have to include that the people working for the government and the family of the working in the military services will force also to participate at this election. So it means they don't care any longer to just demonstrate legitimacy or the support from the people.
The charade of democracy is over. The hardliners have extended their grip on power. Will this change anything, Camelia, inside Iran? Can this regime get any more repressive?
The regime is walking towards a different time and different ages of their creation back to 45 years ago. As much as the supreme leader is aging, they were feeling they have to have everyone working at this system be close to a very narrow ideology of the leadership. And the confrontation with the Iranian people, where they are massively, once the regime change, is more important to them to can demonstrate having a democracy, or they care for democracy. We are seeing an absolute dictatorship in Iran is facing the Iranian people. And this is phenomenal, but we had an example of this in the past 1,500 years ago in my country, and all of these path of the changes in Iran, from having like the Arab occupations and after that the Mughal era in Iran, we see that how the resistance and the people who were seeking their own type of the democracy has been defeated, the occupiers or the forces who were forced themselves to govern Iranians.
And can I ask you briefly about the Iranian rapper Tumaj, who of course has got in headlines around the world. He was sentenced to death for writing a song that became the anthem to the protests in Iran. Any update on his status?
There is no update on his status, and that's what we heard. He is still in the confinement, not being allowed to even make a calls with his family. I wish him all the best and any other prisoners in Iran. But sometimes the regime is using the prisoners to mix a vibe of the new sentiments and undercover the other events in Iran. And it looks like he has been released and arrested again, and the terms of his prison changed to the death sentence. It might be a vibes the regime wants to cover another events, which it usually does, but I'm wishing him all the best, and I hope we are hearing soon that he has been released, and the other political prisoners too. And if you allow me, I want to wish you a happy Mother's Day, dearest Laura.
Thank you. Thank you, Camelia. Happy Mother's Day to you as well. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Camelia and Tikavifad there. Always a pleasure to talk to Camelia. Yaki Dayan is with me still in the studio. It's interesting to get a glimpse of the internal workings of Iran. They seem to have just abandoned any pretense that they are a democratic state.
Absolutely. I mean, this is an Islamic dictatorship that preserves their power with a lot of intimidation and force. And if you follow Laura, I mean, election after election, there are less participants in the process of elections. And as your guest said very much correctly, I mean, they're not. There is a charade. They're not even trying to show some kind of higher participation in the elections. This is a regime that really destabilized the Middle East, and definitely, if you want to create a new Middle East, as the Americans want and the Israeli wants, the only way to do that is by confronting the Iranian regime.
Do you think there's any sign at all that the Islamic Republic is in retreat? Because we did hit a peak, didn't we, a couple of months ago, of course, with the attack on Israel a few weeks ago, but also the Houthis were attacking Israel, Hezbollah continues to attack Israel, and also the Iranian-backed militia inside Iraq and inside Syria. 3 American troops were killed in Jordan. Do you think they kind of overplayed their hand a little?
So I'll tell you what, I mean, eventually this regime will fall. I have no doubt. I mean, you saw the USSR. It took them 70 years, but eventually the regime collapsed there, although Putin is back, and then we see some kind of a new communist state of communism. But nevertheless, I mean, such regime is bound to fall. It would take time, but I have no doubt that eventually at the end this regime would collapse.
All right, Yaki, for now, thank you very much. Well, one way of dealing with tragedy and horror is to create art out of the experience. That's the concept behind a new exhibition at the Museum of the Jewish People at Tel Aviv University. We were hoping to bring you a report on that. I'm just hearing that we're having a few technical troubles. So Yaki Dayan is with me in the studio. Let's talk about what is going to be a very difficult, very painful 24 hours here in Israel, because of course it is Memorial Day. In around 15 minutes the siren will sound. 8 p.m. Israeli time, the nation will fall silent. This is hard and this is sad every year, but of course this year it will be particularly overwhelming for many, many people here.
Yes, Laura, I think this is the toughest day in Israel. I mean, so many people mourn and the nation mourns, and I think that this is the first time that we have a Memorial Day during a war, and so many people have sacrificed their life for the state of Israel, and I think that this year is very difficult. It touched so many. I can tell you that my son that served in the IDF forces and lost a few of his friends. It touched me as well, and as such, it touched every family this year, and the horrors of October 7th. So I think that this year is even more difficult than any other year. This year we will mourn more than any other year.
And do you think that they've managed to keep the politics out of this event? There was a bit of political tension, wasn't there, for Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial Day? Do you think this time that they've managed to make sure that those disputes don't overshadow what will be a very important thing?
Yeah, you're asking about the participation of politicians in the Memorial Day ceremonies. I think it is important that they will participate. I don't see a possibility because the politics will stay out of the ceremonies. This is part of Israel. This is part of the discussion in Israel. I think that what unites everyone is the love for Israel and the mourn for the people that sacrificed their life for us. So that unites everyone, but politics is there. Politics will be there, unfortunately, and we'll see that in the ceremonies because there is a lot of resentment against some of the policies of the government, and that would be reflected in the part of the ceremonies.
Okay, thank you, Yaki Dayan. There, let's go to Jerusalem there, where a ceremony will be taking place this evening from 8 p.m. Our correspondent Emily Francis is there. Emily, just talk us through what will be happening over the next few hours.
Hi, good evening, Laura. Listen, people have been coming here quite early, for obvious reasons. Security is especially tight. But if you take a look, I'm going to get out of the shot, and my cameraman Spika is going to show just some of the people that have been gathering. We're seeing a lot of soldiers, a lot of people that are studying to be officers, a lot of dignitaries, and whatnot. The ceremony supposed to begin at 8 o'clock with the moment of silence. That is with the alarm that the entire country hears. It's an annual thing showing the solemnity of the situation. But this year, of course, has an added trauma for all of us, not just here in Israel, but around the world, given the atrocities of October 7th and the hundreds of soldiers that have died, and not to mention the 1,200 people that were killed on October 7th. So this is, like the United States, the Memorial Day that the people in the States celebrate. Ironically, it happens to be Mother's Day as well. So it's hard to be happy on this Mother's Day, given that this Yom HaZikaron is still very raw for all of us. Now, as far as the event itself, one interesting note, a woman named Sarah Vaspy is going to be the one to light the big Yortzeit candle. Hard to believe, but she literally has lost her husband, her son, and her grandson. Her husband in the Yom Kippur War, her son in the First Lebanon War, and her grandson in this latest war in Gaza. She's going to be lighting a symbolic candle and, beginning this solemn event. We're also going to hear from President Herzog and the chief rabbis, I believe both the chief rabbis for the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic rabbis here in Jerusalem. But again, a very solemn evening that is about to begin in about 15 minutes.
Yeah. Emily, thank you very much. Emily Francis there. What people sometimes forget about Israel is everybody's son and everybody's daughter serves in the army, and those people are fighting and dying right now, so it will be particularly hard for everyone here in Israel. Thank you, Emily. Thank you very much. Emily Francis there, and Kalev Ben-David will continue our coverage of Memorial Day shortly. But before I hand over to him, we're going to backtrack a little bit and talk about some regional news. The misuse of democracy must not be allowed to destroy the state. Strong words from the Emir of Kuwait, who has dissolved the nation's parliament just a month after the election. Kuwait is the only Gulf state which has a democratically elected parliament and a relatively free press. Take a listen to the Emir.
I will never allow the misuse of democracy to destroy the state, because the interests of the people of Kuwait are above all else, and we need to maintain and protect them. In order to prevent the stage of collapse, we ordered the following: the dissolution of the National Assembly and the suspension of some articles of the Constitution for a period of no more than 4 years, during which all aspects of the democratic process will be studied, and the results of the study will be submitted and reviewed to take whatever we consider appropriate actions.
Well, my next guest was born in and has worked in Kuwait. Journalist Ahmed Qureshi, usually in Islamabad, is tonight in Bahrain and is with us now. Great to see you again, Ahmed. Thanks for being with us. And first of all, Kuwait is a bit of an outlier in the region, isn't it, in terms of the fact that it has an elected parliament. Is its democracy now at risk?
Exactly, and thank you very much. And it's not a happy, but, I wish you a great Yom HaZikaron. And obviously, Israel is fighting a major battle against terrorism in this region. A lot of people in this region, by the way, they may not say it, but they're watching what Israel is doing in its fight against Hamas, because it's very important, the fight against militant organizations. Now, coming back to Kuwait, of course, this is a major development in Kuwait, because Kuwait used to be one of the most advanced, most progressive countries, states in the Gulf region. And it had, after Israel, it was one of the earliest democracies in the region, opened its parliament back in 1961. And you see these images right now of the parliament being closed. It's a major development, because in the Arab world, as you see, this parliament was one of the first ones in the Arab world back in 1961, and when Kuwait established its constitution. And now the emir has to actually close it down. And why he's doing that is because there's a widespread discontent in Kuwait, inside Kuwait, with the parliament, with the democratic experiment, specifically after the U.S.-led liberation of Kuwait back in 1991, after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and occupied it for 7 months. And after that, Kuwait sort sort of lagged behind the rest of the Gulf states like Qatar, like Bahrain, like the United Arab Emirates, and now Saudi Arabia, all of them opening up, and Kuwait with its massive oil production money and revenues, and still not being able to sort of catch up with the rest of the Gulf states. So there's a lot of discontent with the parliament, with the democratic experiment. And now the emir finally says, I cannot allow democracy to destroy my country. And this is no ordinary emir. This emir, Sheikh Mishal al-Ahmed al-Jabir al-Sabah, his father was 100 years ago, was the emir of Kuwait. And four of the last emirs of Kuwait, the rulers of Kuwait, three of them actually were his immediate brothers. So out of the last four rulers of Kuwait, three of them were his brothers. So he enjoys tremendous influence in the Kuwaiti political structure, within the Kuwaiti society. And now he's taking this unprecedented decision. I mean, in Kuwait, we've seen a number of times the dissolution of parliament over the past 60 years. But this is the first time that a leader in Kuwait actually suspends the constitution for 4 years, some of the clauses of the constitution, in order to put the country back on track. And we hear from Kuwaiti commentators, basically, the emir's thinking is that Kuwait really needs to rejoin the consensus across the region. It wants to work closely with Saudi Arabia. It wants to work closely with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with other GCC states. Yeah.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to ask you on that note, if it is aligning more with Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Bahrain, where you are right now, do you think there's any possibility at all that Kuwait might choose to normalize ties with Israel one day?
Surprisingly, Kuwaitis have always been called the Jews of the Gulf. I'm sure a lot of the people in Israel wouldn't know this. No. Kuwaitis frankly pride themselves with this. They say we've always been called the Jews of the Gulf. And why is that? Because they're entrepreneurial, they're creative, just like the state of Israel has been. So the Kuwaitis have always been called, very smart people, very good, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to money management, when it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to startups. And there is a good, there's a segment of the ruling elite in Kuwait that would like to have that kind of relationship, but it's too early to talk about that. Right now, Kuwait is trying to put its house in order, and there's a tremendous support in the Gulf. Just earlier today, the president of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, actually called the emir of Kuwait and sort of showed like it was a gesture of support for the emir of Kuwait for what he's doing, because he's facing some criticism from some lobbies, which a lot of people suspect are really allied with Iran. So the emir is facing criticism from lobbies allied with Iran inside Kuwait, and the president of the United Arab Emirates, other Gulf GCC states are expressing support. So I think a lot of people in the Gulf, if you check the Gulf social media right now tonight, there's a lot of optimism with what's happening right now.
Ahmed, we've all learned something tonight. We have to pick up on this again. Fascinating. Thank you very much indeed. Ahmed Qureshi, thank you very much to you. Yaki Dayan, my studio guest, thank you to you as well. Do stay with us here on I24 News. Kalev Ben David will pick up our coverage of a very moving and somber 24 hours here in Israel. It is Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, where we honor the fallen war heroes. Stay with us.
Tel Aviv is ranked the happiest city in the world and the best place to own a home. For 3 generations, the Ben Shalom family has built boutique apartment buildings in the most desirable locations. From restoration in historical locales to homes along Park HaYarkon, Ben Shalom is a one-stop shop from start to finish and friends for life.
Kalev Ben David, and welcome to this special broadcast on I-24 News of Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day. We'll bring you the opening ceremony from Jerusalem's Western Wall Shrine, beginning in just a few minutes, after sirens ring out across the country in remembrance of the nation's fallen. This year added a particularly heavy toll to the number of those being mourned, with the number of soldiers, police, and security officers killed since last year's Yom HaZikaron standing at 766. Of course, most of them fell on and after October 7th. Another 61 disabled veterans died due to complications from injuries sustained in previous years. And 834 civilians were killed in terror attacks, again, most of them on that dark day in October. Joining me in studio, IDF Reserves Lieutenant Colonel Doron Avital, the former commander of Special Forces in the IDF. And Doron, can you remember a day, a Memorial Day in which the mood of the country so matched, unfortunately, the mood of this particular day?
Of course not. We're in the midst of a war, and so many have fallen, and this is a war like a war we never met before. So every Zikaron day has a heavy weight, but this time this is different, and this is really a day of reckoning for what had happened and what we have to do next.
Right. We're seeing, of course, President Isaac Herzog arriving to the ceremony. And he will speak, and then, of course, we will also hear the Chief of Staff, Herzog Halevi, will also speak. So let's go to the ceremony, and in just in a minute, we'll hear the sirens for the beginning of Memorial Day, Yom HaZikaron.
המשמר יכתיב את נשקו. הכתף, שק. המשמר יציג את נשקו. הצק, שק. המשמר יעבור לנוח, עמוד, נוח.
The memorial flame will now be lit by the President of the State of Israel. The torch lighting the flame will be given to the President by Ms. Sarah Waspi, who is accompanied by her son Einav. Ms. Waspi is a bereaved widow, bereaved mother, and bereaved grandmother. Her husband, Lieutenant Colonel Yoav Waspi, commander of the 39th Battalion, who led his troops in the battles and preemptive attack on the Golan Heights, fell on the Yom Kippur War on 20 Tishri 5734, October 16, 1973. his courageous combat, awarded him with a Medal of Courage after he died. Sarah's son, Corporal Arnon Waspi, fell in battle during the First Lebanon War on 25 ER 5743, May 8, 1983. Her grandson, Captain Arnon Moshe Avraham Ben Benisti, fell in battle during the Iron Swords War in the northern Gaza Strip on 7 Kislev 5784, November 20th, 2023. The son of her second husband, Yaakov of blessed memory, Private Omri Ben Zichri, was killed at an IDF post on the Lebanese border on 15 Tishri 5748, October 7th, 1987. Sarah's cousin, Corporal Nir Mizrahi, fell in the line of duty while serving in the Armored Corps on 23 Elul 5744, September 19th, 1984. And Sarah's nephew, her twin brother's son, Lieutenant Ori Maoz, fell in action seeking out terrorist hideouts in southern Lebanon on 28 Tammuz 5748, July 13th, 1988. May the memory of all the fallen in Sarah Waspi's family be a blessing.
המשמר ידגל את נשקו. דגל, שק. המשמר יחטיף את נשקו. החטף, שק.
יזכורו מפי יואב ויינברג.
Score by Yoav Weinberg, the son of Colonel Dror Weinberg of blessed memory, the most senior-ranking IDF officer killed during the Second Intifada. He was 38 years old when he died. In heroic battle in Hebron on 11 Kislev 5763, November 15th, 2002. He was the commander of the Judean Brigade under the Judea and Samaria Division at the time. His mother lost both her brothers during the Six-Day War. Yoav will be accompanied by his brother Ori. Yoav was wounded during Operation Protective Edge while serving as the deputy company commander of Maglan Commander Unit, and Ori, also an elite combat troop, was wounded in the battles of Iron Swords War in Gaza.
יזכור עם ישראל את בניו ובנותיו, הנאמנים והאמיצים, חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל וכל לוחמי המחתרות וחטיבות הלוחמים.
May the people of Israel remember its sons and daughters, loyal and brave, the soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces, its underground fighters and combatants in Israel's wars, and all the members of the intelligence community, police, security forces and prison service who gave their lives in the struggle for the redemption of State of Israel and all those murdered by the terrorist organizations. May all Israel remember and be blessed by their offspring and mourn the loss of the beauty of youth, the heroic acts, the sanctity of their willingness and deep devotion of those lost in those fierce battles. May we cherish in our hearts the memory of these heroes of Israel's victorious battles forever and ever. Please be seated. President of the State of Israel, Mr. Isaac Herzog, will now address us. Every year after the siren is heard, here in the Western Wall, there is a sanctified and special silence, which is only heard this moment every year. But this year there is no silence, there is no quiet, because this year is not the same siren. This year, this siren of mourning, commemorating the fallen who have fallen since the beginning, since the establishment of the State of Israel, there is another siren which is long and continuous, one that began at 6:29 a.m. on the morning of October 7th, in the midst of Simchat Torah holiday, and continues and accompanies us today. It is crying out, it is sharp, it is burning, it is the crying out of a nation of national mourning. My God, cry out, daughter of Israel, cry out and weep. The fire has eaten Israel. I stand here by the remnant of the temple with a torn piece of clothing. Clothing that is torn is a symbol of grief and mourning of the entire nation. It is a national year of mourning. It is a symbol of a bleeding tear in the heart of the nation, a tear in the heart of the State of Israel, which is crying and cannot be consoled because of the daughters and sons it has lost. Soldiers and civilians, civilians and soldiers will not stop crying. Our eyes will shed tears because the crisis is so big. I would like to turn to you, our hostages, our brothers and sisters who are being held captive in their families. All of these national days, we do not forget you for a moment. No bigger commandment is it than redemption. We must be courageous. We must choose life. We must not rest until they return, all of them, home. Bereaved families, beloved, dear families, the wounded of terror attacks and Israeli wars, Minister of Defense, Chief of General Staff, and heads of the defense establishment, ministers and members of Knesset, the 10th President, rabbis, diplomats, ambassadors, representatives of various organizations, as well as civilian and bereaved families. Last year, I was talking to you about the 9th plot at Mount Herzog, the fallen of the 1948 war. But since the last Memorial Day and this year's Memorial Day, so many more graves have been added. Hundreds more graves have been added throughout Israel and have changed the landscape and our landscape. The pain is tremendous. Just a few hours ago, we accompanied in the funeral 5 of our beloved sons. From Dan to Be'er Sheva, from Gilad to the sea, there's not a single step of our soil that has not been covered with blood. A few nights ago, I went to Mount Herzog once again. I found myself walking around the graves, and I was so grateful. I felt with such strength the intergenerational connection between the plots, yearning, valor, pain, redemption, a connection of a fighting spirit that we find in every generation, a connection between Plot 9 from 1948 to the plots of those who fell in Latrun and the Mitle, Ammunition Hill, Sinai and the Golan Heights, and the Beaufort and Bint Jbel, and the other battlefields, so many, countless, in intelligence, assignments, operations, and terror attacks since the beginning of Zionism. And from there to the new graves, there are so many of them on Mount Herzog that have been added, unfortunately, and continue to add to plots, yes, plots in plural, of the fallen from this last war. Believe me, brothers and sisters, that I would have liked so much, with all my heart, to tell the story of each and every one of the beloved who have fallen from each and every of Israel's wars, from all of the defense forces across Israel. Their kindness, their beauty, their valor. But the crisis is so huge, and we have so many who are dead, too many. And therefore, I must see before me what one bereaved father told me just weeks ago. I hear them telling of one son who was dead, and I think it's my son they're talking about, he said. And therefore, in my address tonight, I am asking to return once again to that nightly visit at Mount Herzog and to light small candles, small stories of some of the fallen this year. Each and every one of them represents something about the eternal image of all of the fallen in Israel's wars and all the terror attacks. They are a mirror of thousands of stories. We will forever remember and love and cherish in our hearts the memory of them all of them. My soldiers are there and I need to be there. That's what Colonel Jonathan Steinberg told his wife on the morning of October 7th. Yoni, who is the commander of the Nachal Brigade, came across terrorists on his way south. He was killed fighting heroically and was buried in the new plot on Mount Herzog. The biggest thing you can do is to safekeep the nation of Israel, said Yoni in a recording to his son. Right next to him, I see the grave of Colonel Loni Levy, who was wounded critically in Operation Protective Edge, recovered, went back to fighting, and even lit a torch on Israel's 70th Independence Day. But that dark day, he too went to Re'im, and he fought the enemy until he was shot and killed. Yoni and Ro'i are examples of commanders who run on ahead, because they are the pillars of fire leading the camp. When I saw their graves side by side, I could not but remember so many other commanders, heroes we have lost during Israel's wars, commanders who were leading the force and paid the worst price possible. And not too far from them is Eitan Haddad's grave, who is a member of the first response unit from Be'eri. He was born and raised there, and now he is buried on the mountain. I stood there at night on the mountain and thought of the long hours of heroic battles throughout the Western Negev communities, civilian courage, and all the members of the rapid response units, the coordinators of civil security, and civilians who fought and lost their lives, fighting, sometimes alone, on the first line of fire until their final bullet. Hundreds of civilians fell on October 7th and during the entire war. And in the spirit of the Unatane Tokef prayer that we say on Yom Kippur just a few days before that terrible, tragic day, we, during this Memorial Day, remember all those murdered, all those who fell, civilians and soldiers, whether by fire, by strangulation, by sword, whomever who was at the entrance to their home and who was on the street, some in the battlefield, some in the outpost, some in the bus station, some in the police station, some in the car, some in the kibbutz, some in the party, maybe in the shopping mall, or by missile or rocket, some in tunnels, some in hiding places. Forever, forever, we will remember them. Generations have dreamed of coming to Jerusalem. We have the honor to defend it. That's what Belat said a year ago. This is what Rubin said just a year ago. A lone soldier on the morning of October 7th, Roz defended the kibbutz Sa'ad, and a month later she fell in battle with a terrorist in the old city of Jerusalem. The police officers plot on Mount Herzog, where Rose is buried, is one of valor, the image of Israeli police officers in this war. I see Rose's grave and I remember all those brave women, female soldiers and police officers, commanders and warriors, heroines of Israel who have lost their lives, who defended their country, saved lives and paid with their own. And like Rose, on the tombstone of our nation, so many come from various countries, immigrants, heroes who have traveled far in order to take part in this great war, in order for us to realize the vision of living in Israel. And now they are buried in the Holy Land on Mount Herzl and across Israel. Friendship is a virtue, and now this friendship is giving us the spirit of fighting on the home front and on the war front. Colonel Tomer Greenberg, who was born in Kfar Saba, living in the valley. I see his grave on Mount Herzl, just near the silent plot of the 35. And just like Salman Khabaka, who was buried by his home in the Druze village of Yanuach Jat. On October 7th, the two of them, Salman and Tomer, fought with courage in the kibbutzim. Tomer in Kfar Aza and Nachal Oz, and Salman in Be'eri. The two of them fell in battle in the Gaza Strip. I'm here, Salman. I'm here. Can I help you with anything? Salman's voice was heard on the radio just moments before he was killed. Please cover for me, said Tomer. And this friendship is an Israeli alliance, a pact that crosses religions, perceptions, political positions. I cry out the bereaved families who are Druze and Bedouin. They cry out, they demand of us and of all of us to acknowledge the honor and privilege of being part of the Israeli story as equals among equals, to the full extent of that phrase. Every name is a world that has come crashing down. Every name is a void that will never be filled. Here is the grave of Levi Lifshitz from Modi'in, who did not want, as he said, to be a war animal. And before he left home for the last time, he said, I am fighting for my country. It is the right thing to do. And not too far from him, on Mount Herzl, the graves of Oriya, Aimal Goshen, son of a Zionist, determined family who came here from Ethiopia, and Roy Dawi from Jerusalem, who was drafted to Givati following Liel Gidoni, who fell in Operation Protective Edge and are also buried on Mount Herzl. The three of them, Roy, Oriya, and Liel, and so many others who have fallen in reserve duty and in conscript army, have left behind them final words, commanding just one thing: smile, just smile. And there are some moments there in the new plots where you remain breathless and your heart is crushed, one grave next to the other, Noam and Ishai Slotki. On the morning of October 7th, the two brothers left their children and their wives behind, and even though no one asked them to, they hurried to fight at Kibbutz Alumim. Together, they stormed the kibbutz and killed many terrorists, and together they fell, beloved and pleasant in their lives and deaths. They did not part. I see their graves, and I think about so many families who have lost more than one beloved member. Their world coming crashing down once and again, and the verse and on Mount Herzl being echoing, why should I bereave you both in 2 days? If I could, I would stand here tonight and tell you the story of each and every one of our fallen this year and throughout the years. But unfortunately, I could only tell you of a few of them, because behind each such story, each such candle, huge flames of valor, courage, strength, and life of many burn. Citizens of Israel, on this holy day, I would like to remind us all in the world at large that we have never wanted or chosen this terrible war. We did not choose this one or any of those before it. All we wanted was to return to Zion, from which we have been exiled forcefully, and to relive here in a democratic and Jewish state, to build a life here, a future here, and hope. We've always dreamed of peace and being good neighbors to all nations and countries in the region, and we will not cease to do so ever. But as long as our enemies will seek to destroy us, we will not put down our swords. These last few months have been so painful, but we have learned about the strength of the Israeli nation during them, because we have come out of this crisis and we have fought. We discovered the IDF and security forces warriors from the age of 17 to 97 on all fronts, from all forces in the south, in the north, in Judea and Samaria, and in every area. They risk their lives for us, and they expect and ask of us all the time that we remember we are one single nation, that we be worthy, that we simply just be worthy. This torn shirt I am wearing, this bloody tear that we feel in our hearts cannot remain meaningless. The bereaved families tell me this time and again. The torn heart of the nation must be healed. It must heal the tear in the nation, the rift in the nation. And this is a cry out. Please do, please resurrect as a nation. I would like to pray for the recovery of all wounded in body and in the mind. We must support them and their families as they battle through their recovery, as they treat their mental and physical scars. I would like to strengthen and embrace, on behalf of us all, the IDF soldiers and so many reservists who have left everything behind in order to go to the front for so many months and have lost friends in battle. I would like to strengthen and embrace, on behalf of us all, the police force, the border police, and the special units, the ISA, the Mossad, the IPS, the Rapid Response Unit, and all defense establishment arms, the fire brigade, and the rescue forces. I would like to thank them and their families who sacrifice so much for this country, for the privilege of protecting and defending Israel, the privilege of serving in the IDF. It's a huge privilege. It's not a burden. It's a privilege, a huge one. Huge sanctified privilege, sanctified by blood. May God defend them and protect them forever. Bereaved families, beloved and dear bereaved families, on behalf of the entire nation, I would like to thank you. I bow my head down in the presence of your courage and hope that you will have days of loving kindness, recovery, joy, and hope. We get so much from you. We are inspired by you. 2 months before Yishai Slotki was killed, his daughter Be'eri Shachar was born, and now this little baby's name has a new meaning. Shachar is a dawn, and we want a new dawn to rise upon the kibbutz of Be'eri and other communities in the south. That's what their father, Yishai's father, said during their funeral. And Avia Slutki said, the name Shachar Be'eri resembles the hope that cannot be destroyed. The people of Israel, my brothers and sisters, today too, deep within this national grief, I believe with all my heart that a new dawn will rise on Israel. Thanks to and for them and for us. May the memory of the fallen of Israeli wars and terror attacks be cherished in the heart of our nation for generations. IDF Chief of General Staff, Lieutenant Colonel Herzi Halevi, will now address us. On the day when a person takes upon themselves the burden of commanding in the IDF, they put on their shoulder responsibility and commits to valor. Their soldiers are taught how to fight in the war, how to be a soldier. They teach them how to have values, to be professional, to be determined, to initiate and to commit themselves to the job at hand. They tell them the heritage of those before them, heroes of Israeli wars, and shapes them. They lead them and keep having the responsibility for their lives. It is that person's responsibility. When they fall, the commander goes to their families and has the same responsibility on his shoulders that never passes. This responsibility is embedded is shown on the faces of these commanders, and I see it every time I meet them. President of the State of Israel, Mr. Yitzhak Herzog, Minister of Defense, Mr. Yoav Gallant, bereaved families, dear and beloved and distinguished audience. During the war, I have often come to the forces fighting in the Gaza Strip. Imagine the battlefield, and before me is a young officer who is courageous but also thoughtful, and who realizes the responsibility, and he shares the battle stories and key insights, and I listen to him and learn from him. And when I leave, with me is the image of the commander in him, and I know that I can rely on him and others like him. And as time goes by, I hear that a ferocious battle and fierce battle had taken place and he had fallen. The memory of his determined look and his strong words will always accompany me. It is so painful to have lost him, but the cause is worthy. Every Memorial Day we stand here and read the prayer of Yizkor for our commanders and troops who are no longer. The youth, the courage, the sanctity of the desire, and the commitment. And as we read this prayer, we recite it and we remember the fallen, what they have managed to do in their short lives and what they have not managed to do. And when we recite about the courage, we see before us the last moments, the value-based choices, the courageous decisions they made in order to uphold their oath to defend the State of Israel. A yearning for valor, a yearning for something that you think is within reach. It is the essence of human desire because it seeks to obtain what is not within reach. There are many facets of the valor of the IDF troops throughout the years. The stories of their courage are different in time, in place, in circumstance, but they all share one single factor. The heroes of the IDF have been drafted to the IDF because they had a sense of duty, of meaning, and when the time came, they had the courage to do the right thing. And in the service of every troop and soldier, there is valor. In the willingness to take the responsibility, to take on a role that is risky. That's valor. In every action of an individual to protect and defend the many, there is valor. The fallen of Israeli wars did not seek death, but they wanted fuller lives. They wanted to follow their love. They wanted to realize their dreams. They wanted to leave behind a mark in this world. They were heroes for others and on behalf of life. And when they fell, they left behind them a mark of courage forever. Today, we hang our heads low in memory of those who fought before us and alongside us in the wars for Israel's redemption and liberty and have lost their lives in battle when facing the enemy. We remember those who have lost their lives in accidents and those who could not stand the illness of their bodies or minds. As we remember the missing ranks, we swear that we will stand by our wounded in body and in mind, and we will do everything we can in order to locate those who are missing and have them returned to Israel. We swear not to forget the hostages, women, men, children, and the elderly, civilians and soldiers, and not to abandon our profound duty to have them return home swiftly. On this Memorial Day, on Israel's 76th year of its independence, and on behalf of every IDF commander before me, I salute the 25,040 fallen of Israeli wars. As a commander, as the Chief of General Staff in the IDF in this war, I take responsibility for the IDF having failed in its mission to protect the civilians of Israel and the citizens of Israel on October 7th. I feel the weight of this war on my shoulders every single day, and in my heart I understand well its meaning. I hang my head low in memory of the civilians that we did not have the time to save, our colleagues, the members of the Rapid Response Unit and security forces, and the IDF soldiers, reservists, men and women, and conscript soldiers who fell in battle since the war began and until today. They were warriors, fighters who took responsibility wholly for their task to defend Israel. They overcame what was in their way, and they stormed on ahead without waiting to be told. They stuck to their duty and did not abandon it in the face of evil they saw before them. In the heat of war, they led and were led by commanders straight into the inferno. In long days of tough, bold fighting, in the midst of the enemies, above ground and below ground, they have all stood bravely, facing the danger and overcoming it. We have a huge debt, an endless debt, to all those who have walked down this narrow path between the sanctity of life and giving of life. They saw themselves as those who alone had to determine the fate of the war. They did not ask for anything except to be a shield unto their nation. Dear bereaved family members, on the day of it when a commander loses one of his soldiers, his responsibility.
Doron Herzog Halevi referring to the mission of saving the hostages and sounding an apologetic note, saying for those we did not save on October 7th, and a public taking of responsibility for what happened.
Exactly. He said it before. I mean, said we failed in 7th of October and we are trying to get back, dismantle Hamas and bring our hostages back. This is a commitment of the Chief of Staff in this day that we have really to understand the full weight of what had happened and what we have to do next. We're in the midst of a war. This is not an Independence Day outside of the war zone. This is in a war zone.
Right, and also a message to the troops to, in a sense, kind of boost the troops. That's something I've not quite heard of, because we really haven't had, certainly not, I think you'd have to go back to the first Lebanon war, a Memorial Day that is so in the midst of battle. Exactly. A reminder from the president just of 5 fatalities, combat fatalities in Gaza the other day. 2
days ago, exactly. It was very touching, the story that he was referring to, of a commander that he meets on the ground and he gets this feeling, because when a commander meets a young commander, he knows whether this is a guy he can trust, and he said, this is a commander I can trust, and then a few days later he discovers that he died in battle. This was a very personal and touching story. Yeah, he has to boost the troops. We are not now, we can't, of course we have to mourn, we have to take responsibility, but we have to keep fighting because we're in the midst of this war. The hostages are not here. Hamas is not completely dismantled, and we have so many fronts open in the north. Yeah, tough times.
Tough times. Let's go back to the Herzog Halevi, the Chief of Staff.
The attempt of others to hurt us. IDF soldiers, commanders. On the day we wore the IDF, we donned on ourselves responsibility. On the day of our drafting, we are united for one worthy cause, defending our country. That is the way it has always been, and that is the way it will always be. It is a huge privilege to be your commander. You are heroes, you are value-based, you are determined and committed, you are willing to take a risk for this worthy cause, the worthiest of causes. Our duty and debt to the fallen is from generations before us, from all those who have yearned for this country and have not been able to enter it, and for all those who have returned to this country, who have held on to the soil, and whose valor ensures redemption and the rising of Israel in its country that the IDF protects. May the memory of the fallen be a blessing. Yossi Gamzu wrote the following: those who will be no longer, those we will no longer meet, those who will never again laugh, those who stood up to the fire, those who ran on ahead, all those who were and are no longer, still remain. They remain in all of our hearts. They remain and will remain forever. In the wonderful smile, in the shooting rifle, in the silence, and in the warmth of weeping. How short is springtime, how silent the post, how mute are the songs in their presence. All the great words are worthless in the presence of a single mother of a single one of them all. They remain. No memory will forgive. No forgetting will erase. No love will heal in time. Except here, they will no longer know whether to be silent or cry out. The silencers alone cry out on their own. They remain. Let us rise as a chapter from Psalms is recited, as well as the prayer for the souls of the holy, Kaddish, and the prayer of El Maleh Rachamim, to be followed by Israel's national anthem, Hatikva. Chapter 83 of Psalms, by the Rabbi of the Western Wall, Rabbi Shmuel Rabinovich. A song, a psalm of Asaph. O God, keep not thou silence. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies are in an uproar, and they that hate thee have lifted up their heads. They hold crafty converse against thy people, and take counsel against thy treasured ones. They have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. Against thee do they make a covenant. The tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagrites, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, Philistia with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria also is joined with them. They have been an arm to the children of Lot, Selah. Do thou unto them as unto Midian, as to Sisera, as to Jabin, at the brook Kishon, who were destroyed at Endor. They became as dung for the earth. Make their nobles like Oreb and Zeb, and like Zebah and Zalmunna all their princes, who said, Let us take to ourselves in possession the habitations of God. O my God, make them like the whirling dust, as a stubble before the wind, as the fire that burneth the forest, and as the flame that setteth the mountains ablaze. So pursue them with thy tempest, and affright them with thy storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek thy name, O Lord. Let them be ashamed and affrighted forever. Let them be abashed and perish, that they may know that it is thou alone whose name is the Lord, the Most High over all the earth. A prayer for the souls of the holy by the IDF Chief Rabbi, Brigadier General Rabbi Eyal Krim.
Our
holy brothers and sisters, heroes of Israel, of mighty spirit and action, who have given their lives for the sanctity of God, the nation and country in Israel's wars, in acts of defense, retaliation and security, in the line of duty and while serving, and all underground fighters and combat brigades, and all the fallen in Israel's wars, and all the members of the intelligence community, police, security forces, and prison service, who gave their lives in the struggle for the redemption of the State of Israel and the establishment of the state, and all those who were murdered here in Israel and beyond its borders by the hands of murderers from terrorist organizations. God will remember you in kindness, and avenge your pure blood with compassion. For it says, "Sing aloud, O ye nations, of his people, for he doth avenge the blood of his servants, and doth render vengeance to his adversaries, and doth make expiation to the land of his people." Hashem will make your light shine and expedite the end of your waiting. The gates of heaven will always be open to you in safe paths and dwellings. You will sit with the heavenly angels. Your souls will be bound in the bond of life. Hashem your God, for you have fought God's war. We will see Jerusalem consoled, the vision of the resurrection of the dead with our own eyes, as prophesied by our prophet, Israel's shepherd, Ezekiel, son of Buzi the priest, for the end of time as follows. Thus saith the Lord God, "Behold, I will open your graves, and cause you to come up out of your graves, O my people, and I will bring you into the land of Israel. And you shall know that I am the Lord, when I have opened your graves and caused you to come up out of your graves, O my people. And I will put my spirit in you, and you shall live, and I will place you in your own land. You shall know that I, the Lord, have spoken and performed it, saith the Lord." Kaddish by the Rabbi Shmuel Slotki, father of brothers Noam and Yishai Slotki of blessed memory. Sergeant Major Noam Slotki and Master Sergeant Yishai Slotki lived in adjacency to one another in Beersheba. And when they heard the sirens on Saturday morning, they did not wait to be told to report to duty. They put on their uniform and rushed to defend the Gaza envelope communities. Both fell in battle at the gates of Kibbutz Alumim on 22 Tishri 5784, October 7th, 2023.
גדל והתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברך יראותי וימליך מלכותי ויצמח פורקני ויקרב משיחי. בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהא שמי רבה מבורך לעלם ולעלמי העלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה ושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן.
המשמר יעבור לנוח, עמוד נוח.
The
prayer of El Maleh Rachamim, merciful God, by the IDF Chief Cantor, Lieutenant Colonel Shai Abramson.
המשמר יעבור לדום. משמר דום, המשמר יחטיף את נשקו. החטף, שק.
מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים טהורים וגיבורים כזוהר הרקיע מאירים ומזהירים לנשמות חללי מערכות ישראל שנפלו במלחמות ישראל בפעולת הגנה תגמול וביטחון בעת מילוי תפקידם ובעת שירותם ושחרפו נפשם למות על קדושת השם ובעזרת אלוהי מערכות ישראל הביאו לתקומת האומה והמדינה ולגאולת הארץ ועיר האלוהים ולכל מי שנרצחו בארץ ומחוצה לה בידי המרצחים מארגוני הטרור בעבור שאנו מתפללים לעילוי נשמותיהם בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים וייצרו בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו ושלום על משכבותם ויעמדו לגואלם לקץ הימין ונאמר
We will conclude with the singing of Hatikva, which today will be charged with another profound meaning. From the bottom of our hearts, hope and prayer that no more of our sons and daughters shall fall. Hope and prayer for the recovery of all wounded. Let us pray for the immediate return of the hostages to their homes, their families, and their country. Bini Talmi wrote that when you return here, weary on the path leading up, we will embrace you quietly and lovingly, wordlessly. We will see in your eyes, between the extinguished flames, the sparks of joy and compassion, the sparks of your soul, and the beauty of the soul that did not stop. Blessed be the God who hears a prayer. Hatikva.
נפש יהודי הומיה ולפת מזרח קדימה עין לציון צופיה עולה התקווה בת שנות 2000 להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון וירושלים.
המשמר יחטיף את נשקו, החטף, שק. המשמר יציג את נשקו, הצק, שק. המשמר יעבור לנוח, עמוד נוח.
אזרחי ישראל,
Citizens of Israel, we invite you to visit the Ministry of Defense's Department of Families, Commemoration and Heritage's Yizkor website. Light a virtual candle in memory of the